Welcome, I'm Kirk DeHere with Craft Supplies USA. We're here today to talk about the Sorby spiraling and texturing tool. It does a lot of really cool things, has moldable cutters that come on this. We're going to take you through some of the textures and some of the spiraling that it is capable of doing. We've got a few samples here. I've got bottle stoppers, I've got tops, I've got little pendants, platters, bowls, and we will go through and explain the various techniques to get some of these more difficult textures along with some of the easy textures. And we're going to have some fun. So I'm going to take a minute here, clean up my lathe bed, and then we'll get underway. All right, got my lathe cleaned off. We're ready to get to work. First off, I do have safety glasses on. These are prescription lenses. I wear prescriptions, so talk to your optometrist. Get yourself a set of prescription safety glasses. I highly recommend that. First thing we're going to do is true this blank up. So I'm going to start with my spindle roughing gouge. We'll pass across there, make sure it doesn't have a bounce. We will put a spiral on the outside of this blank. The blank I'm using here is hard maple, and a good dense hardwood works best with this texture and spiral tool. However, end grain is much easier to texture and spiral than side grain. All right, let's take a look at the tool here. So right here I'm set up with the cradle on the tool and the 4mm cutter. The system itself, when you buy the system, comes with a texture wheel, which is beveled on both sides, a 2mm wheel, a 4mm wheel, and a 6mm wheel. And these are beveled on one side. So you can tell the difference between the spiral tools and the texture tools just simply by how the bevel is presented on them. Now to use this tool, there's an index on the cradle. With your Allen wrench, also provided, you're going to loosen the cradle. There's a line etched into the shaft of the tool, and then I've got the index on there, and you move this left or right depending on which direction you want your spiral to go. What the cradle does is allow me to repeat my position of the cutter. But the more you twist this to the side, the more likely you are to break out the pattern. By stopping at that first notch, you'll be more successful. So I recommend starting off, definitely don't go past that first notch. And we'll practice that. So I've got this set. I've got my cutter, or my index, leaned to the first notch on the left-hand side. I'm going to set my tool rest up. Now my tool rest is going to be rather far back because I don't want this cutter to be right in there, but I want to be on the cradle. Height of my tool rest. I want to be where the top of that bevel is at about center line or just slightly above when the tool is level. And then to get the tool to cut, I'll drop the cutter by lifting the handle. In its purest form, this is a negative rake scraper. It's just rotating, and that's what makes the difference here and makes the spiral and or the texture, is that negative rake scraper cutting. So as you know, a negative rake scraper is not very aggressive, and so I can get away with having the tool rest back a ways. Speed. Again, we're hard maple, end grain on this, and speed about 500 RPMs. This tool takes time to develop a pattern, but speed doesn't help. So you want to be at the lower end of your speed. As we get larger on some things, if we were doing a platter, we might want to be at even a lower speed, 300 RPMs, and just give it time. Now as I put the tool on the wood with the handle level, right there you can see the cutter starts to rotate. As I lift the handle, it starts to dig in. And I just need to give that time to develop the cut. Once I've got the cut started, I can widen the cut by pulling the tool sideways, or, ooh, I broke it out there, got a little aggressive. Push the handle and pivot off the rest. Now the beauty of the cradle is I can stop here and I can check my progress, and I can see a spiral developing on this work, and I'm going to come back in and pick that up. So with the handle level, get into the groove. You see it start off, the cutter's rolling fast. There it finds the groove. Lift the handle. And I'm just going to bring this right around, and I can take it right off of the edge. Bring it back into the center, bring it up to a start point. Now it's not liking that start point, it's getting really fine, really tight for this size cutter. Now I might want to do something right in the center of that there, so I could change the tip a little bit, but I'm going to change everything around. That's how the system works with the cradle. We're going to break all the rules from here on out. So we're going to set this tool to the side. I've got this one with the same cutter, the 4mm cutter. Difference is, when you look at the head of the screw, I've got my cutter upside down on the one in my left hand, where it's set right with the one in the right hand with the platform. I've removed the platform. This gives me a lot of versatility, and I can come in and change the way things are working. That little surface right there is just plain. I want to develop a little texture, so I'm going to rotate the tool so where my cutter is running almost vertical, and just use the corner of that, and let's just put a little texture on that. With your markers, and I'm using Tombow markers, use the sides of your brushes. Don't use the tips. They'll last a lot longer. And I use Tombows because they're a permanent ink, or a pigmented ink. But you can see I've got a little texture right down there in the start. So let's go ahead and face that off a little bit. We can part that section off. Now I make a lot of boxes, and so my parting tools that I choose to use are narrow parting tools. We got a nice little Sorby right here. I'm going to bring the speed up. As I start the cut with my parting tool, I brought speed up to about 1500 RPMs. I'm going to start with the handle up level, but as soon as I get a start, I'm going to drop the handle, find a bevel, and arc towards center. In about 1/4 of an inch, come back, repeat the process. And just step that back and forth as I go across there. The left hand comes up over the top, and I take that piece right off the lathe. So I've got some nice little spiral going on there, a little texture on there. You know, you could make these for nice little ornaments, pennants, all kinds of things. So get a little pennant on there, or just throw them on the floor as you heard. I'm I'm going to face this blank back off. We'll repeat another pattern and have some more fun. I've got my 2mm cutter head on here. My tool rest is still set for the standard tool rest height. This is set in the backwards position, if you would. The flat edge against the screw. Bring my speed up to 500 RPM. I'm going to come in and I'm going to make contact on the bevel, the ground surface of the tool, get the cutter rotating. I've got it vertical. And then I'm just going to give that a little push to the outside towards the tailstock on the handle. And we'll do that twice. Step out a little bit. First cut started about 3/16 of an inch out. I'm about 5/16 of an inch out. And we got a pretty little flower in there. Let's go ahead and take just a second, tip of the skew, and frame it. That frame on that bead, I'm going to put a little black around that. Black captures and confines the color. So I've got that. Now let's continue on with this piece of wood here. Let's put a spiral out here. So now obviously I don't have the base unit underneath this. I'm going to lean the spiral left or right. Again, I reference about that number 1 line, and I've put a red line with paint marker underneath or across the center of my blade. This because I've been using this to help students, this tool to help students learn this. And so that helped them understand, because it's not etched on this side. And just give that tool time to develop that spiral. Now let's come back right here, turn it to that 1 o'clock position from the 11 o'clock position. And do it the other way. Now you hear that cutter pick up speed when I come out in diameter. So I don't need to have the high RPMs out here, but I've got a spiral going one way, spiral going the other way. Let's go ahead and separate those with our skew. Nothing fancy there. I'm just using my skew as a negative rake scraper. I've got this surface out here. Let's go back to our 500 RPM. I'm going to take, still working with this 2mm wheel. Come in, tip it. I'm tipped to the 1 o'clock position, we'll call that. Lift the handle. And slowly advance that cut. Let's take our red marker. Again, frame with black. Let's take a look at what we've got. So I've got a spiral out here on the outside. Start coming up, and I've got a little broken surface right on the edge because I took that right out to the edge. I got a spiral going left and right, and I got the little flower on there. So I can part that off. You could drill a hole in that. You've got an ornament. You could turn it around, mount it the other direction, texture the other side, do a pennant on it. Leave your imagination open. Top of a box. There's all kinds of fun things that we can do with these tools. So back up to about 1500 RPMs. Now, when I used the parting tool last time, I told you I came in flat, and let's talk about that. If I came in and just anchor, bevel, cut, right on that lead edge, I lift fibers. I don't want those fibers up typically on there. That's the proper cut, but I don't want those fibers, so I'm going to start level and scrape, and then find that bevel and cut. Again, stair step down through, so I'm just widening that up a bit as I go. As you bring that hand over the top, clear your chuck. Sounds obvious, but do it. So there's our texture on that. A little spray lacquer on that could set that if you needed to. And you can see on the top of mine, compared to the new cutters, I've got a color difference, and that's because I've sharpened these. These can be sharpened. Sorby, again, has a nice little video on sharpening them. I'll go up against the face of my grinding wheel. Not the sides, but right against the face, and I'll take a block of wood to give it just a little resistance on here. And so if this was the face of my grinding wheel surface here, I'd take a little block of wood and hold that. Now the real problem here is everybody tends to roll that edge over. Once you roll the edge on that cutter, you've got a problem. You've got to take everything back, or in most cases, just replace the cutter. That's what we want to avoid. We want sharp tools, but we don't want to have to replace that cutter prematurely. So pay attention to what you're doing when you sharpen them, especially if you're on the grinder. And let's do a 4mm scallop, a spiral, and we'll bring that right out to the edge on this piece, and then we'll look at it and see which direction we want to go. So again, I want to have my tool rest back far enough behind that if my cutter goes vertical, if I rotate my cutter to the vertical, I don't want my tool rest to make contact with the cutter. Neither tool wins in that battle. You dull your cutter, you chew your tool rest up. So it's not a good situation to be in because they lock together and just chew up the wood, chew up the tool rest. Don't ask me how I know this. I've had students try it. So I've learned from other people's experience on there. I'm going back to about my 500 or so RPM, down to about 400 right there. That's fine. I've got the tool with the bevel on top, the screw on the bottom, tipping in about 1 o'clock, if the hand of a clock here, and get that cutter rotating, lift the handle, let that cut develop. It's got a lot of side pressure against the axis of the lathe, and you can hear the lathe growling at me. It's not real happy about it. I've got the handle tucked in my side just to be secure. stop that for a minute, take a look. So I've got the handle tucked in my side so that it's secure. It doesn't need a lot of leverage because, again, it's a negative rake scraper, but I want to use large body movements in order to help control everything. So I'm breaking a little bit of that surface out here. Not too concerned about that. Right now, we're going to continue to run that out. Now, I want to pick that cut back up. Obviously, I've moved this around. I can come in, handle level, get it rotating, and I rotate about where I was, and I can feel that drop into that slot. Once it drops in, I can lift the handle. Pick up the cut. Make it a little deeper, if we choose. So we can continue to do something out here, but first I want to clean this edge off. And that edge is where those broken fibers were right initially. Now this pattern's very popular on long suction fit lidded boxes all the way down there. You could develop that, and then when you part them off, you've got a nice grain match going together. Let's do something a little bit different here. I'm going to start to shape the outside a little bit. Let's do a little end grain bowl. Little parting tool, start level, drop the handle, angle that in slightly. I've got lots of meat in the bottom of this. Measure twice, cut once here. Slightly undercut that surface. We've got a nice little spice bowl, end grain bowls right there. About my 500 RPM, 6mm cutter. Now I should also note that the flatter I get the cutter, and on this one notice we're twisting the handle and twisting the cutter, it changes the spiral. So this is a tight spiral, this is a more open spiral. We talked about that not going past the 1 o'clock position with the platform on there earlier, and let's take a look and see if we can see that pitch change a little bit as it comes out. The flatter I get, the more it goes into the spiral rather than the texture on that or the twist. That's got a real pretty flower right in there. Let's come in and put a little color to that. And blend a little yellow over that. So we got a nice little medallion there, pretty little one. All right, with that, I've gave you a little bit of instruction. You're only limited by your creativity. Get one of these Sorby spiral and texture tools and give it a go. Also, get the little narrow parting tool. Don't forget to tag us on Instagram. We love to see your stuff. And if you've got any further questions, don't hesitate to contact us and talk to one of our techs at Craft Supplies USA. Thank you for your time.